Well, I can see my picture on Facebook, so you may be live.
Thank you.
Well, everybody else is as well.
Good evening, and apologies to everyone for the technical issue that's caused us to be very, very late there. And thank you to our guests, candidates, for bearing with us. We had an issue that prevented us going live there, and hopefully Ian is still on the phone and we can hear him.
I am still poised, absolutely in a state of cat-like readiness to jump into the Eastney Craneswater hustings, one of our favourite wards in the city, as we always get good engagement. And first time in this season of podcasts, we've managed to get 4 candidates to turn in. So would you like to make the introduction, Simon?
I shall. It feels like I've done this before. So joining us from Labour, we've got Jane Shepherd. From Reform UK, we've got Mark Zimmer.
The sound is very garbled. And
Right.
Yep. You're back now, Simon, but you were slightly in the kingdom of the Daleks there.
Okay.
You were trying to do 2 things simultaneously. Don't touch anything, just talk.
Okay, I won't. So aside from a slight trip to Scaro then, so we're joined by Jane Shepherd from Labour, Mark Zimmer from Reform UK, Peter Candlish from the Liberal Democrats, and Stephen Gorys from the Conservatives.
And welcome all. So Eastney Craneswater, in terms of its... Sorry, I've got feedback again there, Simon.
Yeah, and we're... I don't know quite what's causing that, Ian.
Okay, I will press on as it seems to go on, but it is...
Is Ian Supreme Dalek to everyone else as well?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm getting everyone else at Supreme Dalek as well. Okay, so I don't quite know what's going on there. My apologies for whatever it is that's happening that's kind of causing that. Hopefully, I'm coming in through loud and clear. Ian, I'm just going to carry on until we can try and figure out what's kind of going on with that. In the meantime, so Eastney Craneswater, it's a ward that's changed hands several times over the last few years. We're very, very lucky to have all 4 candidates with us this evening and to be doubly patient considering the IT issues that we've just happening. So rather than kind of talk more about that, just let's kind of try and go straight into our opening speeches. Now, before we tried to go live, we conducted a coin toss, and that enabled us to understand the order of the speeches. So first up for the speeches is going to be Mark from Reform UK. So if you can just bear with me a second, Mark. I'm just going to make sure I've got everything in the right place for you to be able to do your speech, if that's okay. So give me a second. Okay, so we're good to go. When you're ready, Mark, your opening speech, please.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Hello, my name is Mark Zimmer. I'm from the Reform UK candidate for Eastney and Craneswater. I live in Eastney with my wife and family and have done so for the last 8 years since moving from the South Sea. I served my time as a fitter turner apprentice in Portsmouth Dockyard and later worked as a safety site manager at Amity Quarters, Queen Street and the QA Hospital, Cosham. I've been involved in crime prevention as a guest speaker about home security at local councils, police forces and neighbourhood watch groups throughout Hampshire and West Sussex. Never one to shy away from addressing controversial hot topics and finding solutions. Therefore, I'm interested in local issues such as homelessness. Sofa surfing is one of the hidden homeless. 1 minute part of a family, the next, friends and families will try and help for a while. Not much help from the government. Work starts to be affected, and the next thing, no home, no income, in debt with your bank, and your bank account's been closed. Opening up an ordinary bank account is near impossible once you're in this situation. In effect, you're an outcast to the rest of the population. A council-backed temporary bank account can help people feel more in control of their lives, supplying a postal address which allows for job applications and a returned address, while helping people get back onto their own 2 feet, both mentally, financially, and with self-belief in their own abilities again. The other issue is beach access for all. We have approximately 2 miles of shingle beach from Fort Cumberland to Southsea Castle, give or take the new sea defences. Along this beach, there are only 3 pathways leading onto the beach. I'll use the term loosely as they're not fit for purpose. Leading to nowhere, without shade or a solid level platform to allow wheelchair or seating for elderly or anyone else with a disability to experience and enjoy the beach area like everybody else. Everybody should be able to access the beach, even if it's just to throw the stone into the sea, a simple thing we all take for granted.
Thank you very much, Mark. And next up is Jane. So if you can just bear with me a second, Jane. Let me just get my screen ready for you to be on. He says frantically pressing buttons. Right. Okay. So. When you're ready, please, Jane.
Oh, hi, I'm Jane and I live on the boundary of Milton and Eastney Craneswater ward, and I was born and brought up in Portsmouth. My mum was a teacher and my dad was an electrical engineer at Aswee up on the hill, and I'm a graphic designer and illustrator. I have my own business and I mostly work in the area of rights, so human rights, health rights, and women's rights. And my strengths really in project management and understanding and solving problems. I've also been a researcher and a consultant for various non-profit initiatives. So I really understand what it takes to make change, and I guess that's what I'm interested in, and what I would bring to the role of a councillor is making change for the better. I've always been involved locally in campaigning. I've campaigned for services for people living with HIV. I co-founded the Open Access Studio at Amiga Centre for printmaking. I led a petition for the council to ban pesticides in public spaces, and that was most recently. And people may know me from the Stop Aquin campaign. I did the design and the campaign strategy that led to the 2022 government decision to turn down Aquin's planning application. And that's me.
Thank you very much, Jane. And next up is Peter. So bear with me a second while I just get you onto the screen, Peter. Okay, and
okay. Sorry, Simon. I think that's my cue to go.
No, that's all right.
So
sorry,
a record of...
sorry, I hadn't started the timer yet. Don't worry, you're fine. It was me. Don't worry. My apologies. Away you go.
A record of action and a promise of more. That's what the Lib Dems have said for years, and that's what I would bring as a local councillor for Eastney and Craneswater. Along with my Lib Dem team, I've spent the last 3 years knocking on doors and listening and acting for local people. So I've reported graffiti, I've solved recycling problems, and I've got trees planted. And you just can't replicate that by standing behind a national party flag starting 6 weeks before a local election. And let's remember, we're talking about a local election here, not a general election. In the last few weeks, I've tried to run a very positive campaign focused on getting for Eastney and Craneswater more GPs and dentists, more help for vulnerable people, especially pensioners and families, and also more care for the environment, especially fighting the sewage dumping that goes on Eastney Beach. That's what a local champion does, and that's what I would like to be. This election will no doubt be close again, but the Lib Dems have beaten the Conservatives in 4 of the last 9 elections and won the last election. So I'm hoping that once again, we can come through on May the 4th. We never know what's going to happen, but I'm optimistic, and I would hope to keep Portsmouth moving forward and make Eastney and Craneswater an even better place to be.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And then next up is Stephen. So if you can just bear with me a second, Stephen, while I just get everything ready for you. I will not be a moment. Yeah, that was better. Picked the right one in the end. Right, so Stephen, if you'd like to start your opening speech, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen Gorys. I'm the Conservative candidate for Eastney and Craneswater. A little bit about me. I've been a district councillor for 21 years and served the public in that role, both as a deputy leader of the council and also leader of the council. I've been a portfolio holder for a number of different cabinet positions, including planning, social care, affordable housing, and as well as that, I have been the leader of the council. So I do understand the ups and downs of council life. In the civic role, I've also been the mayor. We called it a chairman because we were a district council rather than a borough, but it's very much the same sort of thing. In my spare time, I'm a business mentor and a businessman entrepreneur. I work as a research fellow for the University of Portsmouth, helping small businesses with their strategy, cash flow planning, direction of business and travel. So I've got a lot of experience in that role as in a business environment. On the voluntary side, I worked through the pandemic at St James's Hospital, helping many vulnerable people get their jabs as and when they needed. And I have also worked with children, youngsters on the Duke of Edinburgh. I'm an award leader and assessor. And currently, you can come and see me every Saturday morning down on the Southsea Prom, where I'm a run director for Park Run. So I try and help out people to get fit, get active in their life, because these are very important parts of what we can do as a community. In a council role, I would like us to develop far more of our community engagement, and part of what hopefully we'll deal with tonight, we'll be able to explore that a little further. Well, that's me.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, lovely. So I'm just going to come back to our overall shot, and hopefully we can then carry on. Ian, are you still with us?
Oh yes, I am. I know. I'm enjoying the opening addresses, and now we will dive into the questions. And it appears my warm, dulcet tones are coming through without Dalek. So, if you're happy to go to question 1, what are the key issues that the people are talking to you about as you meet them on the doorstep? And could I ask that first, please, to Jane?
Yeah, sure. Well, Eastney Craneswater is such a different ward, I mean, from one area to the other, there's so many different kinds of housing stock, so many different issues, some of them competing. I mean, on one hand, you've got large villas, large Victorian villas on one end of it. On the other, you've got people with leases and caravan parks. So there's a lot of different concerns. I mean, I guess my favourite so far has been too many swans. But especially with the seaside being such a major draw, there's a lot of visitors. There's a bit of a tension sometimes between visitors and residents' needs. There's some really poor housing on roads like Waverley. So it'd be great to see standards driven up with maybe a more robust landlord licensing scheme that Labour has been trying to push through. There's been several requests from residents for safe crossings for people, both on Highlands Road and on Eastern Parade. Dog fouling comes up a lot. People find it very offensive, and I really think the council should make this much more of a priority. Obviously, antisocial behaviour and crime around Albert Road and around Wimbledon Park, and I've worked with Stephen Morgan and Labour councillors trying to address residents' concerns, and also plans for Eastney swimming pool and the lack of facilities to replace that. That's been another top issue, along with sewage discharges into the sea.
Thank you, Jane. Pretty comprehensive list. So if I could just ask you, Mark, what are people telling you on the doorstep?
Well, I think it's just the state of our seafront in general. It's been allowed to fall into disrepair over the years. Our promenade is crumbling in places. Red tar is used to infill the widening gaps. This only pushes out the edging stones, leaving large, deep cracks that's a hazard to walks and dog paws. I was only along there this morning. The seated defence area up St George's Way has been patched so many times that the patches are being repatched, making this a one seating area look like it's been half demolished. Yeah, I'm fully in support of the Eastney Beach site of importance for nature and conservation between St George's Road and Henderson Road, as having this its natural habitat on our shoreline is priceless and should be carefully managed. The shingle has not been managed though, making it near impossible to install access walkways for those who would like to use the beach but are resigned to the unshaded crumbling promenade, or promenade, as you come from. The original area on the site is now overgrowing to what seems like out of control, and this is now encroaching upon Southsea Beach. For visitors and Portsmouth residents alike, to an untrained eye, the beach is unkempt and uncared for. The council really needs to address our seafront. We are so fortunate to have this environment, but the lack of beach management is letting us down. The beach and the seafront is a jewel in Portsmouth's crown. Wouldn't it be a shame to let it slip even more?
Thank you, sir. So, Stephen, what are you hearing?
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. It's quite a mixed message, but there are some very clear things. The public constantly tell us about council tax and the financial or lack of financial management from this council at this time. The main other concerns are things like, I think as Jane mentioned, crime and antisocial behaviour. It's not the major things. Thankfully, most of us don't suffer the horrible effect of major crime on ourselves, but we all do experience low-level crime, the little nitty-gritties we have along the seafront. Motorcyclists driving at breakneck speed just because they can. These are issues that are endemic at the moment. Other things they're telling us is just general council waste and bureaucracy. It's got to be done better. We need to be far more focused on delivering a good service to the public. The overwhelming thing is supporting local businesses, help in the high street. We've all been through a terribly difficult time, beyond our control, a lot of it, but people need help now with their cost of living, the crises that we're going through, caused in part by the pandemic, in part by the terrible war going on in Ukraine. And we must address these as major issues promptly.
Thank you, Stephen. And last and by no means least, Peter, what are you hearing on the doorstep?
Well, truthfully, although I've said this is an election for a local councillor, the national issues are typically the most important things that people talk about. So they talk about problems with the NHS, they talk about cost of living issues, and some way behind that, they talk about environment and crime. So those things have got local angles as well. So on the GP side, it's all about getting face-to-face access with doctors, being able to get appointments, people talking about trying to manage the 8 o'clock rush to get through to be able to book something, or the time it takes for someone to come back to them after they have booked it. They also talk about the traffic and parking, but we have a separate question about that, so I'm going to not dive into that one, because I'm sure we all know some answers and have some opinions on that. And the third one I'll talk about is the seafront. I agree that people say that it's not perfect. The cycle lane is a nightmare with the car doors opening into it. But also people are excited by what they see starting to come out of old Portsmouth with the new coastal scheme, and they're looking forward to that to roll forward to the rest of the ward. There are many, many more things, but in my 90 seconds, that's what I'll be calling up for you, Simon.
Thank you, Peter. So the good news is that many of the subjects you've all touched upon there will be covered in some of our more in-depth questions. Do any of the candidates wish to use their 30-second rebuttal to come back on anything one of the other candidates have said?
If you don't mind, this would be for Peter. On the sewage problems, and that is quite extensive, I'll give you that. What positive steps have you made towards Southern Water?
So on a personal basis, I don't have a direct route to Southern Water.
Right, okay.
What I have been able to do is, I obviously support the Stop the Sewage South Sea. I was at the protestable they had on the beach last August, and I've been a supporter of that campaign all the way through. I've written my letters to the local, to the minister, and I've also been lobbying the council. The biggest single thing I would say on a personal basis I've been able to achieve are the new, I call them poo boards, the notice boards down on the seafront, which at least tell people, or start to tell people, the level of sewage that's in the sea. So those people who want to walk their dogs or go swimming can make an informed decision. It's not the answer, but it's what we can do locally, and there is much more we need to do on a much wider basis.
Thank you, gents, for keeping nicely to time there. In which case, if there's nothing more to add, I will pass you on, Simon, for question 2, please.
Okay, so our next question is, what would you see the council do to help shopping areas survive and thrive? And I'll ask that first to Peter, please.
Okay, back to me already. I think the first thing we have to accept is that our high street is changing fast, and going to change an awful lot more. And I think there are some opportunities in that. So you see in places where shops are now being converted into retail, into housing, affordable housing for people. And I think we have to view that as positive. There's too much, there are too many shops, and they won't all survive. Commercially, it's just not viable. I think it's also an opportunity for us to do more to make the high street more pleasant. What does that mean? Well, that means chasing out some of the cars and the car parking and putting in place things that people actually like to walk and go into. The high street of the future will be different, and we have to think about what that one is going to be.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And next, if I can put that to Jane, please.
Oh, yes, thanks. So I thought about this question in relation particularly to Albert Road, to the bit of the road that we share between the two wards, and it's such a unique street and one that I remember from when I was a teenager. And I do think we could really do an annual event that would bring everyone together and help promote the streets, a kind of I Love Albert Road initiative. I'm also really keen on using art and creativity to bring life back into unloved corners. And there's a brilliant example at the moment, which is, I don't know if you've seen them, the big billboards by the corner of Bristol Road, which was done by Coast Guard Studio and Pogo. I mean, they really help make a place feel like a place you want to go to, a destination. There's an ideal spot for a planter and seating bike racks just outside Ken's Fried Chicken. So these kind of small initiatives can really make a street more pedestrian friendly. But I've got friends with shops at both ends of the streets, and both of them say that as traders, they're really scared by the level of crime. So there's definitely a big issue around that. And clearly we need the council to have an action plan. You know, how are they gonna promote the street and respond swiftly when there is antisocial behaviour? And I think they need to draw that up with traders. They know best what needs to be done.
Thank you very much. And if I can put the same question next, please, to Mark.
Right, I'd like to see the council play a more active role in reintroducing key shops within the high streets. With shopping centres like Fratton, Ocean Park and Farnington all helping to change our shopping habits, well, they're offering convenience, we have lost our communities. Along Albert Road, there's one post office, no butchers, no bakers in our ward. These shops were the hub of our community. Take Branston Butchers as a great example. Okay, it's not in our ward, but this shows you what a community shop can do. Queues of people outside talking to one another. Fancy that. Talking again and getting to know your neighbour. With the help of negotiating leases with landlords, step business rates over a longer period of time, training in business accounts are just a few of the ways the council can help. The butchers and the bakers have always been the centre of all communities. With the council's help and our support, we can put the unity back into our community. We want our butchers and bakers back.
Okay, thank you very much. Last but not least, Stephen.
Thank you very much. High streets should be a mix of community things. They should be a mix of shops, people living, and they should be a pleasant place to be. What we could do, and what we don't have along Albert Road, is very much pleasant street furniture. That could be planters and flowers and trees. We can bring that into the community, which would be better for the green issues of traffic pollution and so on. So I think we should be far more creative along the high street. I agree that the issue of antisocial behaviour is a difficult one. CCTV may or may not work. It does tend to push crime off the main areas where the CCTV is into the other streets adjacent to it. I would like us to effectively rebrand Albert Road as almost a multi-layer department store. We've got a whole lovely mix of different sorts of shops. And if you go into a large department store, which we've lost sadly in Palmerston Road, but the high street itself could become a department store. So you go there, I think, as Mark said, you have your butcher, you have your baker, you have your various specialist shops, and we should be encouraging them as a community thing. We don't, I think, have much of an issue between the south and the north, central South Sea and Eastney and Craneswater. I think we can work together as potential councillors for the future. It's the high street that's the important thing.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. And would anybody like to make use of their 30-second rebuttal as a response to anything that one of the other candidates said?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay, Mark.
Sorry, Peter. This is not a vendetta. With the bike sheds, obviously, what I can't understand why the bike sheds have been put on the road when they're for able-bodied people who cycle, and we've got to use our wheelie bins through the house. And that anybody who's disabled or elderly has still got to do the wheelie bins. But, you know, I worked in the dockyard and there's thousands upon thousands of guys used to come with their bikes and wheel them through the house. If you're disabled or elderly or infirm, you're not going to ride a bike. But trying to pull a wheelie bin through, so I think really.
Sorry, Mark. I'm going to have to intervene because
Okay.
we did explain that the purposes of the rebuttal was to come back on something the other candidate said. Peter isn't a sitting councillor, so I don't think it's appropriate for you to be challenging him on council policy.
Sorry, I did go off track a little bit there. I do apologise.
No worries.
Did you want to, Peter? You look like you're chomping at the bit to give a response. Did you?
Well, I would have taken a swing at the pitch if I'd had an opportunity.
Sorry.
So the bike storage sheds, I think, have been a big success over the last couple of years. Crime is a problem. I've had several bikes nicked, and if I had a bike shed round by my place, I would be using it. So that's why we need them. The problem is Portsmouth, as we all know, is such a densely crowded city that you've got to find places to put them. So we might disagree on the solution, but my solution would be every now and then to take a car parking space and put the bike shed into that. That encourages you to have the cyclist go to the heart of the pedestrian, the cafe areas, these community areas that we all want. I think it's quite interesting listening to everyone's different perspectives on how to get there. But we all want to bring those communities back. And I think they can be part of that. On the wheelie bins, you're opening up definitely a big but different door. So let's leave that one.
If with bearing in mind, obviously, us starting late, so our apologies with that. We're just kind of conscious of time, but I also want to be fair as we've kind of opened that slightly. Is there any quick rebuttal or response that Jane or Stephen you wanted to give on that subject? No. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ian.
So, moving on to question 3. Over the summer, there's going to be some great leisure and entertainment opportunities coming to the ward. Victorious obviously brings lots of people into that area and into the ward. How can we maximise those opportunities? And can I ask that first to Stephen, please?
Well, thank you. How to fix the challenges? Well, I'm not totally clear what challenges you're referring to, but it could well be the visitor numbers and how we deal with those. As we all know, parking in this area.
Pushing for.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, yeah, you're going to see, I mean, Victorious is going to bring tens of thousands of people
Indeed.
Into the...
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting problem. We don't have enough parking. There's always been parking issues. We'll touch on that later on, I think, on one of the other questions. But well, I'd like to look on things on the positive side. I do think the number of extra visitors are bringing extra revenue into this area. We have opportunities when they do come. I was a volunteer last year at Victorious where we were using art for the youngsters. They could come in and do pictures and we can then pass good messages on to the youth that are attending. Mums and dads want to come and listen to the music and see the bands and the fun going on there. But the children that come with them, we can give some benefit to. I don't think we can easily solve the parking problem. The works that are currently going along the seafront, they are possibly going to make it worse, but we'll have to wait for that all to be finished. I know there's a lot of conflict along there about those issues. I think that they do as well as they can, given the issues of just the sheer number of visitors. Southsea is a great place to come to and people want to come and see it. So we just have to sometimes suck it up and be prepared to suffer a little bit as the locals.
Thank you, Stephen. So, Peter, how can we make this challenge an opportunity?
Well, I agree. We have to view it as an opportunity. We live in a wonderful place, and for 10 months of the year, there really is space for anyone who wants to find it. And for the remaining 2 months, we are a destination not just for people from outside of Portsmouth, but also for a lot of people from the north of Portsmouth to come down and enjoy what we enjoy all year round. So we need to be willing to spend some money to keep it looking good. There's money in next year's budget for desilting Canoe Lake. We need to keep the wardens going around the green spaces and telling people about the barbecues and the litter and the dog poo and all those things which undermine that. And I think we also have to be, as Stephen has said, very realistic about what can be done in the current frame about things like the crowding and the parking. There's park and ride, but not enough people want to use it. There are now barrel bikes for you to come down. There's signposting to bring you down, but people still try to bring their cars. I think in time, 10, 15, 20 years, we'll find that pressure will decrease a little bit. But in the short run, I think we have to just keep managing it as best we can.
Thank you, Peter. Jane, how do you see the challenge or opportunity?
I think it's fantastic that so many people want to come and visit the seafront area, whether it's, whether it's to enjoy the seafront or whether it's to come to Victorious. I think it's a bit unfortunate that we've lost two of the main attractions, which were swimming pools. The Lib Dems have closed both of those. I guess in terms of the kind of competing interests, you need to get the right balance between the needs of residents and visitors or customers who do so much to boost the local economy. And I think the council could play a bigger role in maybe facilitating any kind of problem that needs to be better understood and coming up with solutions. I think the pandemic has brought bigger numbers to the seafront. I've certainly noticed more people coming down. And I think we need to ask, are the seafront strategies up to date and relevant? Is the council managing to protect biodiversity? Do we have enough facilities? How many toilets should we have? How many bins? Can we recycle? I mean, these are questions that really need to be answered.
Thank you, Jane. And last and by no means least, unless I have lashed up, I think that question needs to go to Mark.
That's it. No, I agree with Jane with the seafront. We're so fortunate to live in this great city. Southsea Common offering a huge green area. Our seafront is one to be proud of, and it is one to be proud of. A long history that is envied by many. No wonder why everybody wants to visit us. We've events held throughout the year, Victorious, as Stephen mentioned, the Great Safe South Run, the Kite Festival, and the Eastney Water Sports event, to name but a few. As locals, we know the increasing vehicles on our roads and streets is beyond breaking point when these events are held. The Park and Ride scheme is the best option. The organisers need to push this service hard, and with the council providing a quick and easy way to book in advance, offering an array of discounts such as discounted meals, discount on accommodation, and discount on entry to local attractions. This is by far not an exhaustive list. Why not have a guided tour as you pass Portsmouth landmarks on your way to your destination, or better still, a party bus on your way to the festival? Well, it's supposed to be fun, so why not stop with a bus into town? You never know, the council might use their new electric buses.
Thank you, Mark. And do any of the candidates wish to come back on points that any of the others have made?
So I might choose my...
Simon.
Oh, sorry,
Ooh.
Peter.
Away
Peter,
you go. Yep.
Yeah, Peter just had his hand up then, sorry.
No, I was just going to come back and ask of Jane. There's a £140 million, 15-year South Sea coastal scheme that's rolling out from the old Portsmouth end up to Eastney. And there are some fantastic plans built within that. The what are they calling it? The Theatre of the Sea that's going to shortly open behind Southsea Castle. I think these are exactly the kind of long-term improvements that are being made. What is it that she doesn't see that isn't being envisaged? I'm looking to my first cup of coffee at the new water sports hub down at Eastney Point in about 5 years' time.
I think I was referring more to the kind of facilities that we need in order to keep the seafront clean and offer the services that people want, not necessarily whether it's coffee or things to see, but things like where do you go to the loo, you know, where are you going to have the bins? At the moment, there's only a few permanent bins. We're still using those yellow plastic bins. There are very few, if any, water fountains for people. There is no recycling along the whole of the seafront. So I'm kind of talking about the basics. We've got to get the basics right. I think that was my issue.
Thank you both. In which case, Simon.
Okay. So on our next question. So name the one service or facility residents don't have access to that you would see provided. And if I can ask that question first, please, to Mark.
Right, the facility I'd like to make accessible to everybody is the Eastney swimming baths. Once part of the Royal Marine Barracks, it's been a place where hundreds, if not thousands of people have learnt to swim. It was a training pool for the Cockleshell heroes during World War II. The pillbox on the site is a Grade 2 listed building, really in need of repair. But I wouldn't have it opened as a swimming pool, but an interactive museum dedicated to the Royal Marines and their time in Eastney. The grassy area at the rear would serve cream teas in keeping with the style and date of the building. The area can be used for informal or formal gatherings, both for public and past, present servicemen and women. With the Royal Marines flag flying at full mast, their legacy with Eastney is cemented for future generations. They were there for us, let's be there for them.
Okay, thank you very much. And the same question, please, to Jane.
I think I'm going to go on the same kind of theme. We really, really need a swimming pool. We need access to a swimming pool. We need something that's affordable, something that's accessible to people living with disabilities. And we need something that suits the landscape that it's going to be sited in, which at the moment is Bransbury Park. And I'm afraid I do have to say 2 of them were closed by the Lib Dem administration without the funds in place to build a new one. And at the moment, there's no real plans in place. I mean, there's lots of still ideas and consultations. Is it going to have a GP surgery? Is it not going to have a GP surgery? Does it include the community centre? Does it not include the community centre? People need a pool. And I mean, people really need somewhere where they can learn to swim, where elderly people can carry on exercising. And at the moment, there's no clear plan of what this pool's going to look like, and therefore no clear plan of how all the funds are going to be raised. And there still isn't the full amount of money secured for this pool. So I've been working with Stephen Morgan, and me and Paula and Savage have always called for a pool, and we just want the funds to be secured. And we want a pool as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Peter, same question.
Well, it looks like another issue where, as a community, we're all going to head in the same direction, because I would also say the key thing we need is a new pool. The pyramids had turned into an absolute money sink. It was losing $750,000 a year, and the council tax payers are just not able to support that kind of money with the decrease in the grants that have occurred. Eastney Pool, I agree. My kids both were swim teachers there. But it was built 100 years ago for Marines. My kids used to worry about the little kids toppling over because there was no exit place for them. If any of them went under, they had to walk to the side underwater. So we need a new pool. I've taken part in 4 rounds of consultation. I've been to the public meeting. I've seen the plans. The finances are there. They are planned. There is a process that needs to be gone through. And I think the planning application will be there by about the autumn. So I think it's clear what we need, and I love the direction that we're heading in. The location in Bransbury, you know, it's always difficult to find space for new buildings in our area, but it builds on a largely existing site. It's very accessible for people both north and south, which will make it financially sustainable. It's a good plan that's coming together.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Stephen.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to sound like a rather stuck record. I too agree with the pool. I think we must all have been talking to the same residents recently, because that is an overwhelming issue. The fact that we've lost 2 pools locally is a crying shame, I think. I disagree slightly with Peter in the view that councils can't run pools properly. They can. My last council, we actually had a 20 million pound investment from private industry who wanted to work with the council. So I do think there is the will and intent out there from some commercial organisations. That said, it's probably too late to implement a sensible scheme down on the seafront. Many places, particularly in France, St Malo comes to mind, they have pools built out into the sea. I know part of the defence work that's along the seafront now incorporates little pools for wildlife, etc. But it would not have been a much extra expense to build a concrete pool out there that gets refreshed every time the waves come in. When the tide is out, we have a pool that's right on the seafront. With putting some extra shower facilities at that point, we could have had a community thing at a relatively cheap price, regularly refreshed by the sea to some extent. Providing we get on top of the sewage issue, that would be a clean area that we could have the public use. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay. Dare I ask if anybody wants to use their 30-second rebuttal on that question? Jane?
Yes, I would like to ask Peter, you did say that the money had been secured to build the pool, but I believe it is still 2 million short. I mean, there is still talks about finding that extra piece of funding. Costs are going up all the time, building costs and energy costs. And still there isn't any planning applications in. So how can something be costed when it's not actually sure it's not that clear what it's going to be?
If I put a plan together for what my shopping bill was going to be at Asda, I'd have a pretty good idea about what it is now. I won't actually know until I get there. And that's where we are with the planning application. You know, the project is going through. Nothing is final until it's actually done, dusted and reviewed in the past.
Okay, thank you. Everyone else okay? Should we move on to the next question? I'm taking that no one else wanted to use a rebuttal. Yep.
Oh, I'm going to charge on anyway. So we all understand that there's a cost of living crisis. There's rising energy costs, and all parties voted for a 4.99% council tax rise. So if we look at this locally, what more should local councils be doing to support residents? And could I ask that first, please, to Jane?
Well, it's true. I mean, on the door, I mean, I have heard a lot of residents really struggling, and I found that in places where you wouldn't expect it. For example, an elderly couple in one of those large Victorian villas who were living in one room, unable to heat the rest of the house. And thank goodness we've got St Margaret's pantry just around the corner, but it is shocking that we need food banks in this day and age. We should never be complacent about this and take them for granted as a kind of stopgap. And people shouldn't be made vulnerable by poverty that's basically caused by the decisions of those in government. Now, I know the council received the Household Support Fund, which has 3.8 million to provide support to struggling households. And it was really great that Labour could secure the cost of living hardship fund in the last council budget. Labour have also initiated warm spaces, which has been really helpful. I mean, other councils have also done a very similar thing. And the council can play an important role in reducing costs, say, through things like free activities during the holiday for kids, more free school meals. We also had a great idea of the council allowing non-branded uniforms. That would bring down sort of general household costs. So, and I'm sure there's plenty of really good innovative solutions if we look and see what other councils have also implemented. So yeah, they have a big role to play.
Thank you, Jane. So Mark, cost of living crisis, what more should the local council be doing?
Well, I was thinking along the lines of, why doesn't the council get together the large food outlets like Tesco's, Lidl's, or Sainsbury's, etc., and introduce e-food vouchers that can purchase the products that are now sent to food banks, but could then be ordered direct from the shops online. This way, it stops the stigma of having to use a food bank. I was a child who had 3 school dinners, waiting in line to receive my book of tickets whilst the other children walked past me pointing. It was horrendous. How much harder this must be for an adult to have to feel this way. An online service will remove anyone knowing whether you're paying a customer or not when you pick up your shopping. That is my idea.
Mark. Ask the same question, please, to Stephen. What more should the council be doing?
Thank you. Big part of people's bills at the moment is the energy crisis. It's above anything we as a local council can do, I think, but there are things that we can keep promoting. The energy efficient homes, businesses giving extra help. We probably all had flyers through the post telling us about this, but when you actually try to apply for it, there seems to be a mountain of paperwork you need to go through just to get something. I do think we can do things with that. I agree with Jane. Warm spaces, warm hubs, community hubs, those are very important things where people can go to socialize as well as picking up some warmth if they need it, if they're having difficulties at home. I think, again, Mark has touched on an area that I feel we should develop, which are vouchers and working with local businesses, local cafes, local food outlets, certainly with the big boys, the Tesco's, etc. of this world, but the local food shops or suppliers where they can give a voucher into a little community hub. We should be looking at reusing some of the empty shops that have been empty for years. We could convert those. The council could actually use their power to grab hold of some of that real estate and work with the cafes so people aren't embarrassed, like Mark has already said. So they can go to a cafe and say, here's £10 worth of vouchers, take the kids after school, go and have somewhere warm. And in the summer, the problems are slightly different, but have a cold drink in the summertime.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you. Sorry, Stephen, I called you Peter there. That's because I'm thinking ahead. So, Peter, what more should the council be doing?
I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge what the council is already doing. So many of the suggestions that are being put forward are part of council programmes. There are warm spaces programmes, there are energy and money helplines to give people good advice. The council works with the food banks and with the charities, both giving money directly, but also trying to link them up with the private businesses where there is an opportunity. We have to remember that many of the private businesses are also struggling, so they have less cash to be able to do these things than they have at previous times. So what more can the council do? I think some of these issues are beyond the council, and we have to look to the national government to really support them. I think what the council can do is target better. We do some benefits which are universal, which I think in tough times we have to really work out who really, really needs them. We're talking about giving people £10 to have a coffee in a cafe. There's a lot of people for whom £10 means they're going to feed the family properly for an extra meal.
Thank you very much. So, does anybody have a burning desire to use their 30-second rebuttal?
No
in which
takers.
case, I shall pass you to Simon.
Okay, thank you very much. Ian, well, you wouldn't have to be a clairvoyant to think that parking wasn't going to be a question that would come up. Parking is a problem here, is in most parts of the city. But how can we solve parking? How can we deal with things like rat run culture without pitting car users against those that are choosing active travel? And if I can ask that question first to Peter, please.
So this is the type of question where if any one of us comes up with a brilliant answer, we will be carried through the streets rejoicing. I thought when I got involved in politics, I would discuss politics. Mostly I discuss parking and traffic. Anyway, here's my throw at it. So firstly, we need to do away with the idea that there's a conflict between an unsolvable fight between car drivers, walkers, cyclists, and all the other people. I'm all of these things. So we have to find a way to work together. I think we have to promote alternatives to using the car wherever possible. So that means better bus services. It means making it safer and easier to use a bicycle to go somewhere. It means dropping the curve so that people can walk and use the mobility scooters more easily. But these aren't going to, fundamentally take away the problem with the number of cars we've got and the space we have. I personally would be very supportive of further actions to slow vehicles down, except on the main thoroughfares. I think low traffic neighborhoods, slow spaces, cul-de-sacs, all of these things help. But parking is a real hard issue.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And if I can ask the same question to Jane, please.
Yes, well, I would say for decades now, councils, not just this one, but up and down the country have designed cities around car use. So we've kind of inherited a very, history of cars dominating our landscape. So it's no wonder we're in the state we're in. But we do need a citywide parking strategy and not this piecemeal approach we have at the moment. Nobody, it would seem, is happy. And clearly, there's too many cars in some areas of the city. So we need to encourage people to use cars less, to be able to rely on them less. And I guess that's not going to happen in the short term. But we do need to work on reducing short journeys by car, make our streets more pleasant to walk in, the kind of things that Peter was just mentioning, give people destinations to get to and seats and to rest on their way. And I think it's shameful that Portsmouth is one of the most dangerous places to cycle in the country. I mean, sorry, the Lib Dems have been in power 15 out of the last 19 years, and we still don't have a stretch of proper cycling infrastructure. And this city is flat and compact. I mean, it really should be a place we can easily cycle around safely, and we wouldn't have to rely so heavily on cars or taxis. So I think, we should really work with the Pompey Cycle Forum. I mean, we need to work with people who know what's needed to map out safer routes. And we also need a much better bus access and provision so, that we can rely on buses to get us from places. I also wouldn't call it a rat run culture. I think that kind of language perhaps does pit motorists against pedestrians.
It's true.
Then, our apologies for the wording of the question in that regard.
Okay.
Next to Mark, please.
Well, what I haven't heard so far is create jobs. Create more jobs within Portsmouth. We have a dockyard that's trained over tens of thousands of people over the years. We're surrounded by water. Let's start training again. Hydro energy. That way, there won't be the need for 2 cars per house. One to go to work outside of the city and the other to school runs. Like Jane said, it's a short journeys, additional jobs that need to add it to the cost of living. We're full of cars. We need the cars to travel to work. It's catch-22 at the present moment. HMOs are an additional burden. Portsmouth was a family-orientated city, but with the cost of housing based on rental income rather than wage income, the use of 2 cars is essential to provide for a family. Permits are a great income for the council, but it doesn't guarantee a parking space for the residents. And with the permits costing £30 to £120 for your second one, you do feel slightly cheated.
Thank you. And lastly, to Stephen, please.
Yes, thank you. They're not building any more land, so we've got nowhere else to put cars, so we have to come up with creative solutions. I don't think any of us has a simple answer there. I don't think there is a simple answer. I do agree with Jane. I believe she made the point that this piecemeal approach is not working. It has to be done the whole island in one go, or not. Let's not have one area almost competing with the other for parking. One thing we do suffer from, and that people are telling me, is the vast number of students that come into the city. We welcome them, of course, but they come in with a car, they perhaps don't use it for 2, 3, 4 months, and it just sits clogging up our parking areas that could be utilized by others. I think we should be looking at the cycle areas. Again, Jane is quite right, and I do agree that the cycle ways around the city need to be improved. We need to give priority to it. In fact, the new highway code gives a new hierarchy of users, pedestrians, cyclists, and so on. People are rather frightened of taking their cycles in places and leaving them because they're going to get stolen. So we need to have some secure, lots more secure cycle storage around. And let's face it, all motorists tend to love their cars. I can't see any other way of forcing people out of their cars, because that just won't happen. So we do have to come up with more creative solutions. Large areas, large buildings that we are talking about, perhaps in Palmerston Road, to take over the Debenham store or the Knight and Lee store, we should be making sure that they have adequate parking if they're constructed. They can do it on the continent. Why can't we do it here?
Thank you, Stephen. Anybody want to make use of their 30-second rebuttal to respond to the answers of one of the other candidates? Jane, yes, please.
I just wanted to ask Stephen that if he feels that students are bringing cars in, and that's possibly an unnecessarily use of parking space and a car, does he support the use of boy scooters, for example, and other ways that students can get around, which are very popular with young people? Would he see that as part of the solution?
Yeah, I think so, Jane. Unfortunately, many things the council do, like sticking up signs, don't cycle along here, don't take your dog on the beach between these dates. They don't enforce it. So we should either be enforcing those kind of things or not. I do agree, e-scooters are possibly the way forward. We need to make sure that we work within the law as it stands. We need to encourage responsible usage of them. I'm sure you and I see many youngsters 2 or even 3 up on a scooter, which is incredibly dangerous. No helmets, youngsters using scooters, e-scooters particularly, that are not approved, if you will, by the council. So yes, I do think we should be providing that, and I do think we should be helping them to get around the city in a much more constructive fashion.
Thank you, Stephen. Anybody else need to use their 30-second rebuttal?
Can I just jump in again there?
Yes. Go ahead, Mark.
Basically, I was under the belief that the students entered some sort of agreement with when they signed into their residencies about not bringing their cars into the city. It might have just been hearsay. And the other thing is with the scooters, it's a good idea, but to be quite honest, they're more of a hindrance to people on pavements. In my eyes, it's not green, it's just irresponsible. That's me.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay.
Simon, I might just say a couple of words on the scooters. So I think the issue here is a national one. We have to be clear about what local councils can do. Portsmouth is running a test on the Voi scooters, which are insured, regulated, speed limited, all of those good things. There are improvements to be made, but fundamentally, I think they're a good direction. The real problem is with the black shark ones that do 30 miles an hour and jump the traffic lights. Those are unregulated and basically illegal, and it's known to be. But the problem is that enforcement is not a council matter. Councillors and the council can advise and talk to the police, but it's a police issue. I've written to Donna Jones, the police crimes commissioner, on the matter, and I know other people have. If we want to make this kind of thing a priority, it has to come through onto the police service.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Thank you, Peter. Okay.
So,
Ian?
I'm going to take that as a segue into our next question. So question 7. So antisocial behaviour, theft and burglary are blighting the lives of the people of Portsmouth and Eastney and Craneswater. What's your solution? And can I ask that first to Stephen, please?
Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Bobby's on the beat does usually work for me. We have to work cooperatively. Where I live in Craneswater, we have Neighbourhood Watch. It's reasonably effective. Our own street kind of looks after itself. We all have CCTV cameras. They can be linked together where we can help. And indeed, one of my cars was broken into, or tried to be, have all the wheels taken off not very long ago. My neighbours saw it and came and banged on my door at midnight to say, you know, what's going on here? And they were very helpful. So we need to work together and we need to encourage people. CCTV, we touched on earlier. Unless we cover the whole island, it's just not going to work. I mean, we have to be mindful of its effectiveness in certain areas, but frankly, we have to work much more as a community. We need to be able to track and trace things without the big brother approach. I'm not in favour of the police state, if you will, but it's reassuring to all, particularly the elderly, when they see PCSOs, police officers joining them, walking around the town. The police will tell us it's not always the most effective use of resource, but let's face it, that's true if you're in a big rural area. In a city, we should be able to cover it very well. Japan has a fantastic police force. Pretty well every police officer in Japan claims to know through their colleagues every person in Japan, and includes tourists. So maybe we can work towards their model.
Thank you. Can I ask that question, please, to Peter? What's your solution?
So we've already taken away my easy out of passing the whole matter up to the police commissioner. So let me now be complimentary to Labour, because I think it goes back to what Tony Blair said all those years ago about being tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. So on the one hand, we need more, we just need more police staff, uniform, the PCSOs, and the support people to enable those to be out on the front line. That, again, I'm afraid is a national issue rather than a local one, although there is the police precept. But we also have to be looking on the other side of the ledger as well. And we have to be doing things to ensure that young people have constructive, gameful activities to occupy their time. You know, so all those extracurricular things at school, the soccer leagues, they do make a difference, and they do cost money. And as a society, we have to be prepared to fund that. I know the crime situation in Stephen's area is not so intense, but there are other parts of the city where it is much more of an issue, and they really need some investment to help solve those kind of problems.
Thank you. Can I ask that question, please, to Jane?
Yeah, well, thanks to austerity from the Lib Dem and Tory coalition, that cost us our police officers on the ground. Less and less police, less services, and less services offer drug rehabilitation and mental health support, wraparound services for people with complex needs. I mean, when you take away all those services, you end up seeing it on the streets. I'm afraid a lot of what we see now is a consequence of the cutbacks. So we really need to reinvest in people and in community policing. I mean, Labour have a lot of pledges for the next general election, if they get into power, to put more bobbies back on the streets. Portsmouth Labour has a policy pledge to create Safer Neighbourhood Fund. And that would be the council consulting with residents to shape plans for more CCTV, better street lighting, the kind of initiatives that people feel will make neighbourhoods safer. And I've worked with Stephen Morgan and residents in Gaines and Allen Road when they had a particular kind of uprise of crime in that area, to find out what their experiences were and to find out what they wanted what they needed to be done. And then we got the police patrols in that area increased. So yeah, we need to reinvest in our services, don't we?
Thank you, Jane. And last and by no means least, Mark, what's your solution to the problem?
Well, mine's along the seafront at the present moment. It's having speed bumps along the seafront would stop the boy races using them as a racetrack at night, as well as it making it safer during the day for slowing traffic as people get out of their cars. It was mentioned earlier, I believe it's Stephen. I would have said sleeping policemen, but as the force has been reduced, they are all working 24 hours now. We used to have a crime prevention officers. Then it was downgraded to crime reduction officers. And now the government cutbacks, it's more like lip service. This is not the police force's fault, I may add. I would say that the crime prevention advice given now needs to be updated and presented to homeowners in a different format. So their choices are based on new security up-to-date advice, and they can address the home security issues within their own houses with the up-to-date advice. This would be undertaken without raising the fear of crime, as the fear of crime is much greater than the actual crime level it is. So basically, it's just informative and giving people the information they need, real information, how to make their home secure, because it's their responsibility firsthand.
Thank you, Mark. Does anybody want to come back in now? In which case, Simon, last question.
Okay, the end is in sight. So the last question. So if successful, what would be the one thing you'd want to see implemented in your term to improve life for residents in the ward? And if I can ask that question first to Peter, please.
To whom, Simon?
To you, Peter.
Oh, okay. So honestly, I think the biggest single thing we should be looking to do as councillors, if whoever gets in, is to improve the central spaces of our area. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about creating more pedestrianised areas, community areas where people can get together in a modern way and socialize with each other in a pleasant environment. So specifically, that means I think we have to take some brave decisions on things like parking and the role of alternative forms of transport to prioritize spaces for people and not for cars.
Okay, thank you very much. And the same question to Jane, please.
Thanks. And I think possibly Mark's been following my campaign, which is fantastic. But I'd really like to see a boardwalk installed along Eastney Beach, just beyond the coffee cup, where the wild flowers and vegetation grows. There's a fantastic example in Brighton that's been installed recently, made from a kind of hard-wearing composite recycled board. We just don't do enough as a council to make our city accessible to people living with disabilities, elderly people, people with mobility issues, and even people with families to be able to enjoy the beach. So that would be one of my main goals, and to do it in consultation with people living with disabilities.
Thank you very much, Jane. The same question, please, to Mark.
Oh, yes, Jane's called me out on short there, hands up, following her campaign. Very good campaign.
Oh, great.
What I would do as alongside that would be provide a relaxing day on the beach, recharge your batteries in temporary eateries positioned all along the seafront with closed zones dotted in between. This would be inclusive, as Jane says, of everybody, no matter what their age or disability. For far too long now, we've been shortchanged with the odd kiosk selling overpriced food, leaving visitors feeling fleeced. Parking stereo is bought through the app. Why? It should be cheaper. And once the summer is finished, so must all the temporary structures be removed, leaving the beach to have a well-earned rest, ready for next year. The natural beach is what draws people to it, and that's how we will leave it for future generations. That's me.
Thank you, Mark. And lastly, Stephen, please.
Thank you very much. I think the simple thing would be a better run council. This is what the people have been telling us they need. We need people like myself that have run businesses, have worked with various community groups. We see on South Sea seafront all of the time, homeless people sleeping rough.
Yeah.
That should not happen in this day and age. We should be able to support them properly. I don't believe the council does enough to do that. I'm a mental health act manager. I work with people with mental illness a considerable amount of the time. And again, we need to work in a cooperative basis with those. So homeless issues are terribly badly addressed, in my opinion, here. Mental health, many of them are suffering with mental health difficulties, whether it's self-inflicted by drugs or alcohol or a combination of the two. But the council needs to become much more proactive. It needs to listen to the community far more. We take, as a Conservative group, regular soundings from the population of our area. We run surveys, we listen to what they're saying, and we actually have to continue to implement that once we've actually run through those options. Community forums. I sit on the East Hants neighbourhood forum, and that's a fantastic forum where we get perhaps 200 or 300 people who can tell us what's going on. Sadly, because of the pandemic, we've not been able to run it for a little while, but it's about to restart, and that's a really good way for us to hear what the community want.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, does anybody need to use their 30-second rebuttal on that one at all? Fantastic. Thank you very much. In which case...
That leads us nicely into closing speeches. And so just as Simon looks to step everything up, I will just remind everybody that the saddest vote in the world is the vote that isn't cast. So this is the first year where you will need photo ID, and time is running out. We've tried waving our arms and generally shouting at you for the entire duration of these podcasts, but you've now only got until Tuesday to apply for free photo ID if you don't have any. If you scan the QR code in the top of our screen there, it will tell you all the things that you need to have in terms of to make you compliant on the day so you can cast your vote. So whoever you're going to vote for, please ensure you turn up on May the 4th, fully equipped and ready to take your full part in the democratic process.
And don't forget, if you're a postal voter, that you can also, as well as posting your vote to make sure it returns to the council in time, you can submit it at any ballot box in the city up until the close of polling on polling day, and you still won't need ID. So yes, please do bear that in mind. We'll do the closing speeches in the order that we did the opening speeches. First off is Mark. So if you just give me a second, Mark, I can just make sure that we're ready for you.
Ready to go. Right. In closing, I'd like to tell you a short story.
Yep. Sorry, beg your pardon. Sorry. Go.
In closing, I would like to tell you a short story. An emperor hired two tailors who promised to make him a set of the most remarkable new clothes that would be invisible to anyone who is either incompetent or stupid. When the emperor went to see his new clothes, he sees nothing. For the tailors are swindlers, and there aren't any clothes. Afraid of being judged incompetent and stupid, the emperor pretends to be delighted with his new attire and wears them in a grand parade through the town. Everyone else also pretends to see them until a child yells out, "He hasn't got any clothes on." This is how I see things, and so do many others. Never afraid to point out the obvious truth that is counter to prevailing opinions. A fairy tale or fable may be, but it's better than living in La La Land. We've been led down the path by the political elite without asking us what we want and then telling us how to think. For a practical, honest, straight-talking approach to local issues, vote Mark Zimmer, Reform UK on May the 4th.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, and next will be Jane. If you could just give me a second, I can make sure I've got you up on screen, Jane. Okay, Jane, and away you go, please.
Well, I want to see a city that's more vibrant, that regenerates the city centre as a place we want to visit with things we want to do and see. So this could be cultural regeneration with street art, microbreweries, gallery studios, green places to sit, and safe cycling infrastructure to get us there. And I want to see recycling when you get there. And I strongly believe that people should have access to the services that they need. And my experience and background will really help me achieve that for residents. I'm especially keen to see the city create a women's health hub. And it's one of Labour's manifesto pledges. Women's healthcare really would benefit from a more joined up approach. And I'm well networked in the health sector and passionate enough to make this happen. And so you get a lot if you vote for me. You get arts, health, environment, and rights.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. And next up is Peter. So if you can just give me a second, Peter, I'll just get you up on my screen. When you're ready.
Local, visible, caring and competent. Isn't that what you want from your local councillor? I've lived in my ward for more than 10 years, and until I went to full council last month, that was the first time I'd ever seen my two Conservative councillors. I've knocked on doors for the last 3 years, and a lot of residents already know me. Okay, sometimes they call me that Lib Dem sewage man, but at least it's something. We're trying to make contact. I'm also proven to care. From Waverley Road in the west to Ferry Road in the east, I've resolved residents' problems from fly tipping to parking issues to how to vote. And I'm competent. Like Steve, and I've run a business. In fact, I run a £400 million business unit. So I know how to make money and to spend money well. Local, visible, caring and competent. Isn't that what you want from your local councillor? Please vote Peter Candlish at the next election.
Thank you, Peter. Next up is Stephen. So, Stephen, just give me a second, and I'll let you know when I've got you up on the screen. Fantastic. I'm ready when you are.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Away you go.
All
Sorry.
right, thank you. Well, with 21 years experience running district councils, I have a vast background in the ability to make sure we direct the officers of the council in an appropriate fashion. It's very easy to let them take control and pass the buck of authority onto people that are not elected. I seek to be elected as your district and city councillor here in Portsmouth, simply because I think we need a long-term vision for the city. We all want to live in a greener, happy, healthy environment. We can do all of that, but we need to have the vision to do it. I have that vision, and I would ask that you vote Stephen Gorys for your Eastney and Craneswater elections when they're coming up on the 4th of May this year, because without a long-term vision, all of the rest of the stuff we've talked about this evening will just go to waste.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So that concludes our Eastney and Craneswater hustings. We'd like to give our thanks to all of the candidates. We know with less than 2 weeks to go, it's a very busy time, lots of pavements to be pounded and doors to be knocked. So thank you all for giving up your evening and for bearing with us through those slight technical difficulties. And we'd like to wish you all good luck for the rest of the campaign. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And our guests have been Jane Shepherd from Labour, Mark Zimmer from Reform UK, Peter Candlish from the Liberal Democrats, Stephen Gorys from the Conservatives, and I've been Simon Sansbury. Join us next Sunday at 6:27 when we have our last hustings of the season, which will be Hilsey. So join us then.